Welcome back, Sebastian here. So today I wanted to take a look at 6 Formula One drivers I think maybe are in a bit of danger of losing their seat for the 2024 Formula One season. And so I've written 1 to 6 on the board. 6 I would say is probably the least likely to lose their seat, whereas number 1 I think is most likely to lose their seat. So I'll go in order from 6 to 1, starting with the driver that I have at 6. Now for this driver, I don't think they will lose their seed, but with them and the driver I have at number 5, I do think that there is a chance that one of them loses their seat. So I kind of hedge my bets and put both of them on this list. So for Bottas, I think he's had an alright season, hasn't been as strong as he was last year. I do think a bit of it is Zhou's getting better in Formula One, and the gap between himself and Zhou is decreasing. That being said, I think that based on Zhou's junior career, he didn't really show anything in his junior career, his Formula 3, Formula 2 days, that would suggest Formula 1 star written all over it. And while I think he could be a good midfield driver, I think that for an eye to the future, I think especially when Audi takes over, they're going to be looking to have a really standout star driver. And unfortunately, with both Bottas and the driver I have at number 5, his teammate, Zhou, I think there is a possibility that one of them do lose their seat next year. Now, whether that's for Théo Pourchaire, Sauber's young junior driver who's currently first in the F2 championship, or if that's another driver on the grid like Lando Norris, I think that's yet to be clear. But I think that being said, neither of the drivers have really impressed me that much this year, and it kind of really reminds me of the lineup of Giovinazzi and Raikkonen that was the predecessor of this lineup here, and that they were kind of just there. They weren't really impressing me a lot, and eventually both of them were basically let go. And I know that for Zhou, he doesn't have a contract for next year, and for Bottas, I believe he does have a contract for next year, so it could be an option. It could be, I think, a case where Zhou doesn't have a contract, he's more likely to probably get moved. But that being said, for now, I'd say it's unlikely. If I did this video again at the end of near the end of the season, maybe it would change. But for now, I think I have them near the bottom of this list. Now, number 4, I think this will be a bit of a surprise, but I think based on recent form, I don't think it's that surprising, and that is Sergio Perez. So for Perez, he had a really good start to the season, got 2 wins of the first 4 races, and was very close to Verstappen in the championship. But then Miami happened, and he's had 3 extremely poor qualifyings and 4 not great races since then. And I think for him, he's now at the point where Alonso and Hamilton in much slower cars are starting to have it catch up to him, and there's a real chance for Perez to actually lose to P2 in the championship this year. And I think for Perez, I think he's never been a great qualifier, but that being said, this is the best car on the grid. You should be able to get the best car on the grid into Q3, well into Q3, every single race. You know, when Bottas was at Mercedes, he was never eliminated in Q2. He always made Q3 every single race. He was a Mercedes driver, and that's kind of what Red Bull needs from a number 2 driver. And when you're starting that far down, much like in the Gasly and the Albon days, it doesn't help you. It doesn't help the number 1 driver. It's very hard to make a strategy that helps the number 1 driver if you're starting that far down. And I think for Perez, I know he has a contract for next year, but I think in the situation where Mercedes ever get a car, even next year, that's close to the Red Bull in pace, or even Ferrari, if they get into that kind of situation, I think Red Bull will really be wishing that they had a stronger driver. So I do think that probably some people at Red Bull do realize this, that they do need a really strong second driver. And you know, I think there is a good chance that Verstappen could retire at the end of his contract in 2028. So really they need to be thinking right now, even 5 years before then, about looking for long-term options for what they want to do in a post-Verstappen Red Bull. So I do think there is a possibility that they do look for someone to replace Perez for next season, whether that's Tsunoda, whether that's someone else on the grid. I think most drivers on the grid would be very willing to go to Red Bull to race with them, given how much success they've had the last 2 years. Now, number 3, I think, this is a bit harsh, putting this driver on the board, but I mean, unfortunately, rumors are already out there, and while I don't believe the rumors, I do think that this driver here, Logan Sargent, does have to improve if he wants to stay next year. I think qualifying was seen as one of his strong points in his junior career. Had several pole positions in F3 in his second year in F3. Last year was quite good in qualifying as well. And he's been out-qualified by almost half a second almost every race, around half a second. I haven't looked at the numbers, but I'll be looking at that in my mid-season review. But he's yet to out-qualify his teammate Albon. And in the races, they haven't been great. Like last weekend, for example, I know Sargent had a technical problem, but Albon was able to finish 7th. I think this extremely peaky nature of the Williams makes it really hard for Sargent to be able to score points, because for 6 out of 7 races, the Williams will be 18th and 19th. But then that one race where they're really, really strong, it can be unpredictable, right? Which race the Williams will be really strong at. But that being said, those really high speed tracks like Canada, Monza, and Spa later will be really good chances for him. And I think if we get to those tracks and he's still really struggling, he's still 18th, 19th, whereas Albon's in the points, I do think they may consider looking for a replacement. I don't know who would replace him. I know people are saying Schumacher, and this isn't an official silly season or prediction video, but this is just me saying that he hasn't been great this year, and I think that there is a chance, a small, very small chance, that that Sargent is replaced. Now, number 2, you will probably laugh, but people will say no one's seat on the grid is as safe as Lance Stroll's. Now, for just a moment, I'm going to pretend that Lance Stroll is a normal Formula 1 driver and his father does not own the seat. But I'm going to write him down at number 2 here, because I do think that if Stroll was any other driver, I think that there would be a lot of questions being asked about his seat, and I think there would be a lot of drivers who want to drive for that in that Aston Martin. They've had a massive turnaround from last year, and with that comes a lot of expectations. And I think Stroll, up to this point in the season, has not really met those expectations. He's well off Alonso's pace in both the race and qualifying usually, and he's even losing to drivers that aren't in the big 4. Like, he finished 9th this past weekend in Canada. Albon was ahead of him, Ocon was ahead of him, Norris was ahead of him until he got his penalty. And I think for Stroll, I think there will be other drivers, very, very high-profile drivers that are looking around at that Aston Martin. I do think that Lawrence Stroll has a decision to make about what to do. That being said, I would say, realistic world, he's probably still there next year. But I think if it was any other driver, he would be on the hot seat for sure. Now, number 1, and I think some people can probably figure out who this is, and I think this is probably the one driver where I would say it's much higher than 50% chance that this driver is getting replaced at the end of this year. I do think there's a small chance that this driver gets replaced before the end of the year, and that is Nick De Vries. So for De Vries, he really reminds me of Brendan Hartley. Who was a seat filler basically in the Toro Rosso in 2018 after they kicked out all their drivers and Sainz was basically sent to Renault. And for De Vries, I think he was brought in very late. He's not really a Red Bull junior, so they haven't really invested a ton of money in his career. He's also quite old. He's 28. He doesn't really have that much more upside. One of the benefits of bringing him in last year was that he was older, he had lots of experience, he'd be much more polished, a much more finished product. And that finished and polished product is losing quite heavily to Yuki Tsunoda, who's effectively a third-year driver, who's much, much younger than him. And I do think that, that being said, for those reasons, De Vries is very likely to be out of a seat in Formula 1 at the end of this year, if not before. I could see them looking at making a move in the summer, and that would be for maybe Ricciardo. I doubt Ricciardo, but I think the most likely option would be Liam Lawson, who's driving in Super Formula right now. But like Gasly in 2017, I don't know if they would have to honor his Super Formula contract, which would result in him missing races here and there, or if they'll just kind of mail the bag in and just let De Vries ride out the rest of the year, and then just have Lawson for next year. So those are my 6 drivers I think are at risk of losing their seat in Formula One. You know, of course, this doesn't mean that there's other drivers not on this list who could change teams, but I think for the drivers that are, you know, at risk of being out of Formula One entirely and actually losing their seat and not, you know, deciding their seat's terrible and they need to go to a better one, I think these drivers are definitely the 6 I would have on my list. So that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be making my preview for the Austrian Grand Prix a bit later this week, so please stay tuned for that. And if you want to do so, then please like and subscribe. It really helps the video. So thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.